What a hot Greensboro crowd this was. I'm John Martin with the retro view of NWA Boogie Jam 1984. Territorial shows like this and other big shows are available in the Hidden Gems section of the WWE Network as it stands until April 4th, and then, stuff gets moved to Peacock. International fans can still access stuff, but the whole point is for US, we have to deal with another streaming service. Oh well, first world problems is what it is. So get your watching of the old territorial big shows in while you can, because it is going to take a bit for everything to go over to Peacock, because WWE does have a hell of a video library. I enjoyed this show. Now, this was even during the down period of Jim Crockett Promotions, where it was still a layered card. People would be moving around. Some people would go to WWE. Some people were near the end of their careers here. And it was a really good melting pot of just a great goddamn crowd. A nearly 1 hour match between Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat. Really, really good shit. I mean, really, really good shit. This was very, very good stuff. There were a couple matches that were kind of hit and miss, but the Greensboro crowd was so goddamn hot, and it was so great to hear and even feel the crowd energy. I mean, I can only imagine how it was to be in the Coliseum. Just absolutely goddamn great. And overall, I would say definitely check out this show. I'm going to get into the matches, obviously, but if you want to see a cool time capsule of Jim Crockett Promotions, even during a bit of a down period, check this show out. Kid plays the national anthem on a trumpet. All right, it was what it was. We get Tully Blanchard with Paul Jones versus Dory Funk Jr. This was a treat. It was Dory Funk Jr. before, obviously, he would slow down as everybody does because Father Time is undefeated. But Dory Funk Jr., continued to wrestle for years and years after this, has trained so many people. And Tully Blanchard playing the chicken shit heel. It's just great to see Dory Funk Jr. doing, great groundwork, the forearms, just the way he would hit. This was really cool stuff. And it went a bit, but it didn't go too long, and these guys worked well together, and we get a roll-up with tights, 1, 2, 3, so Tully Blanchard gets the victory. This was really, really good stuff. I really enjoyed this. Nice, hot way to open it, and the crowd was popping for everything Dory Funk Jr. did. It shows the respect that Dory Funk Jr. carried in wrestling, no matter what territory. I will say the camera work was a bit wonky. There were times where they would shoot way out. I mean, and it did say in the beginning, present in its most original form due to technical difficulties with the original production. So that makes sense. But at times the camera work was pretty good, and at other times it's okay, now we really can't see anything. We almost have to get binoculars to see what's going on. So we get Ernie Led versus Rufus R Jones. Ernie Led, I believe, would retire either later this year or in the beginning of '85 because he had bad knees from football, and he'd also wrestled for so many goddamn years. And he would go to work for WWE as a talent scout. And Ernie Led, great promo. Great size, really, he could work, good guy or bad guy, didn't matter. Ernie Led commanded respect no matter where he went. Rufus R Jones was a character. That's about all I can say about Rufus R Jones. I mean, the crowd popped for him, and Ernie Led played the heel here, but this match was not good. It really wasn't. We get a headbutt from Jones and a cover 1, 2, 3. It was what it was. It wasn't a great match. It definitely wasn't what the opening match was, but it was what it was, and the crowd popped for Rufus R Jones. And then we get Wahoo McDaniel and Mark Youngblood versus Don Cornotto, Bob Orton Jr. with Gary Hart. Gary Hart and Paul Jones were all over this goddamn show. It was a non-title match because Wahoo and Youngblood were the NWA Tag Team Champions. And this was good stuff. Really, really good stuff. Crowd loved the champs. I miss when tag team wrestling actually was taken more seriously. And it's not that tag teams don't work hard in other promotions anymore. But depending on the promotion you watch, it's kind of it's almost subdued. And I miss when tag team wrestling in a lot of territories just meant a whole lot. But anyway, it is what it is, times change and all that. But I still love great tag team wrestling. And this was that. The crowd was insane. They popped for everything that Wahoo and Mark Youngblood did. So it's really good stuff. Don Cornotto and Bob Orton Jr. were great heels here. And we get a double chop and a double axe handle, and Mark covers 1, 2, 3. So Don Cornotto takes a pin. Was what it was. The finish was a little flat, but the crowd popped for the double chop anyway, so it didn't matter. They popped for everything that the faces did. When Wahoo did his chops, Mark Youngblood did his stuff. Really, really good stuff. It was really, really good tag team wrestling. And then we get a special 6-man match. Angelo Mosco Sr. and Jr. with Junkyard Dog, JYD. Almost said Jake YD. That wouldn't have made any sense. Versus Gary Hart, Great Kabuki, and Ivan Koloff. Great. Gary Hart in a wrestling singlet. I never wanted to see that. Now, he had injuries. He was a manager. He was not, he was just put there as a special attraction. So, obviously, he could be the guy to, he could be the guy to take the pin, and that's pretty much why you would put a manager in there. And he did the hit and run stuff, and it was cool to see Junior and Senior teaming up. And JYD got a pretty good pop in the Carolinas, as you would expect. I do wonder if Great Kabuki always looked like a human waterbed, because I don't understand how he was really able to move. He was a gimmick that basically just did the mist, and Ivan Koloff, his reputation speaks for itself. This was an attraction match. JYD was never good in the ring, but by God, he could get the crowd on their feet, and they popped for Senior, and he got beat up a bit, and then Junior hits crossbody on Hart 1, 2, 3. It was what it was. It wasn't great, but the crowd made it work better than it probably would have had it been just in front of a subdued crowd. Dick Slater versus Greg Valentine. No DQ steel cage match for the U.S. title. So this is just a few months after Greg Valentine and Roddy Piper had their series of matches. Dog collar matches, stuff like that, at like Starrcade 83, and then, from there, it was over respect, but, at the time, the U.S. Championship was part of it. And Dick Slater was here as a champion, and Greg Valentine, it was weird to see Valentine as the face, because usually I think he was a much better heel. It started slow, and then both guys bled. This match did go 25 minutes. I think that there were times where I was like, okay, now they're kind of just stalling a little bit. The show was only 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 36 minutes. But it was what it was. It wasn't bad. There was a pile driver by Slater. There were a few other moves. Both guys, ground each other's faces into the cage. And then into the cage, roll up 1, 2, 3. Dick Slater retains the U.S. title. Okay, cool. Was what it was. Wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but it was, it was fine. It at least made the secondary championship, the U.S. title, actually mean something. And then we get Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat for the NWA title. Strap in, folks, because it's almost an hour. Let's not dull. It's Ricky Steamboat, it's Ric Flair in 1984. Shut up and take my money. It's goddamn great. It was great. These guys never had a bad match. They never fucking did. They feuded over the TV and U.S. championships in the 70s and early 80s. And then Ric Flair had been established at Starrcade 83. Flair for the gold, and Steamboat always pursued him. Steamboat would leave for WWE later in the year, I think. It would either be late 84 or early 85. Sometimes the timeline's a little bit off because so many people move territories. But this was just great shit. Now, I will say the one thing that made me laugh, though, now they had a mixed reaction for Flair because, some people cheered the heel and some people booed the heel, as you would expect. Steamboat commanded respect, but they're in Greensboro, and that's a bit of a crowd that knew who Ric Flair was. And not that they didn't respect Steamboat, but they were cheering Flair. Got a bit of a boo there. That was actually quite a few boos. They got initial cheers from the ladies, and then woo. Kind of cool to hear. And yeah, it started slow. The match went almost an hour, so it's going to start slow with good wrestling and good action, and it's all about building and building. These guys, I don't know how the hell they were able to, turn it up like that. Yes, they did the rest holds and they did the stuff and they did the antics, but the fact that they were able to turn it up that late in the match after like 30 minutes, of some good action, they were able to turn it up and just do all that stuff and hit the chops and everything, the near falls, all the stuff that everything meant so much. This was great shit. It was a really, really good goddamn match. And Steamboat, they kind of mess with the time limit, though, because if you take a look at the timestamps, it actually doesn't go quite the hour, but they say a 60-minute time limit. And Steamboat, manages to hit a crossbody with just a few seconds left. 1, 2, ding, ding, ding. Oh, he can't quite make it. Tommy Young was the referee also. Tommy Young with a lot of hair. I think he almost had a mullet. He was going to change his hairstyle, but he had to mullet over first. That joke is so funny. Actually, it's stupid, but I'm just going to use it anyway. But Steamboat just barely gets it. Just barely, it just doesn't quite happen. He wouldn't win the championship for another, almost 5 years. Oh, it's so close. And that was the right way to do in a near title change, because it made it look like Ric Flair can make anybody look like his equal, but always escape with the championship. That's what champions do. It's good shit. He would lose the championship about a month and a half later to Kerry Von Erich at the David Von Erich Memorial, the Parade of Champions show that was the biggest house that World Class ever drew, and Kerry held the championship for 18 days. But Steamboat would not win the championship for just under 5 years at Chi-Town Rumble in 89. But this is a lost classic. This is one you can check out. Strap in, though. It does take a while, but it is absolutely worth it. It wasn't the main event, and I think I understand why, because they wanted to give it enough time and then put a match, send the fans home happy on last. and they want them to go to the time limit or, stretch the show too long. So they wanted to make sure they gave them the right amount of time, and then, well, what's ever left, hey, main event, go out there and do something. And Steamboat shows respect, and that was good stuff. Then we get Jimmy Valiant with Dusty Rhodes versus Assassin number 2, who turns out to be Hercules Hernandez in a, under a mask. Hercules Hernandez, really underappreciated. So Paul Jones was also in Assassin number 2's corner, and Dusty and Paul Jones are tied together with a Texas bull rope, and basically the crowd loved Jimmy Valiant. He bled. We get Dusty and Jones tangling later, cowbell to Assassin number 2's head. 1, 2, 3. Valiant gets the victory, and then he unmasks and it's Hercules Hernandez, who I'm not sure that many people knew at the time. I know he would work in Mid-South. I can't remember if he was working in Mid-South right at this time, but I know he worked in most of '84. And then Jones hits Valiant with the bell and leaves, and then, but Valiant's the victor, and it cheers, and then cuts out literally right there. But this is a good show, a really good time capsule of, Jim Crockett Promotions, even during a down period in '84. So absolutely check it out. And the Steamboat Flair match, Lost Classic, terrific stuff. Anyway, agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.